All right. Hey, good evening. Welcome to Fantasy Football Tonight. I'm your host tonight. My name is Will Rock, and we'll be joined here by Jared Eisenlohr here in just about 20 seconds. So tonight's show, we're going to be getting into all things fantasy football. We're going to recap Week 6 and see what Jared has in store for us here in Week 7. Jared, let's get you in here, my man. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Will. Yourself?
I'm doing okay. Man.
Excited to represent our boy Aiden tonight. I had to take the tags off this jersey to wear it, but I felt that there was ever a day that it's appropriate, it would be today.
Yeah, it's crazy, when you have a player that means so much to so many people in sports in general. People get really attached to their NASCAR drivers and their favorite quarterbacks and their defensive ends or their favorite pitcher. And, sports are really big for people's pastimes. And I think we kind of shared the same feeling here off air that the win just wasn't the same against the Cowboys. I mean, it was everything that all of us wanted and more. And it was just ripped away. The good news is Aiden had very successful surgery. And sounds like it's going to be about a 6-month process to get him back, which means he should be ready to go for training camp.
Yep. Yeah, it's all that matters. I think at this point, it's the best you can hope for, given the severity and the gruesomeness of that injury. But yeah, I agree. It didn't feel like a win. And Dallas, I don't know about anyone else. Dallas is my most hated team. If every other team wins, if any team could lose every week, for me, it's Dallas. If Dallas played Russia in a game, I don't know who I'd root for, honestly. I just cannot stand Dallas. I just can't stand them. And so to be beating them that badly, it was just a phenomenal day. And then, there was water thrown onto the flame a little bit, but it's all right. We still got the win. In Brad, we trust. We'll figure it out.
And that's where it's going to go. And we're going to be talking about that stuff tomorrow morning. Jared is going to be so kind to join us tomorrow at the 9 o'clock hour. He's going to put together a short list of the best candidates based on availability, contracts, and who he sees that could potentially be really good fits. You know what? You're probably going to hear some names that nobody else is talking about. I can almost guarantee it. But we'll wait till 9 a.m. tomorrow to figure that out and have a good conversation about it. So, do we know who got the Scepter Awards this week? Did you see yet?
I did not.
I didn't either.
You're talking about from Good Morning Football?
Yeah, I think Tyler Algier got it, which I'm surprised. I just don't think that they could give it out a third time to Demo, but man, did he certainly deliver and deserved it for breaking Walter Payton's record. It's quite a feat. Hello to everybody in the chat. Riley O'Brien, Trace. Looks like we have a light crew tonight. At some point, this show will gain some traction, but I'm going to put it on its own channel next year with a whole crew of people doing fantasy football stuff and betting and sports bets and all that stuff. We're going to line it up next year with. So if you guys are interested, if you ever watch this after the live event and you're interested in fantasy football and you have some background in fantasy football or sports betting and you would like to start up a channel, this is the place to be. But tonight, let's get into what happened this past weekend. It's week 7. Tonight we get into week 6 and then roll into week 7. Performances from last week, including Jared's on-target calls, and what did we hit on? What did we miss? How is the Rock Down Cancer Foundation, fantasy team doing? So we're going to get into all that tonight. And look, I have more studs and duds to start with. We'll try to get to it quickly. But speaking of the Cowboys, I'm going to start off with the biggest dud right now, in my opinion, of the NFL, and that is Dak Prescott. Dak completed just 17 of 33 attempts on Sunday, a paltry 178 yards. He threw for 2 interceptions without a single touchdown pass in what was a huge beatdown by the Detroit Lions. And this was against one of the weaker secondaries in the league. Now, I say that, but I'm also going to say this. On paper they were. In the game, they were not. Now, the Cowboys have not been able to run the ball, and putting the entire game on Dak's shoulders right now was just not the best way to go about getting after the Detroit Lions. Prescott should certainly perform better given the contract that he signed, or at least that's what fans think, that your contract means that you're going to play to a higher level. And I will tell you that that's just not always the case.
Often the opposite.
It certainly
Often
is. Other than Jared Goff, who's performing swimmingly right now. And to that point, you know, Lions fans, we know this all too well, that you know, a lot of fans expected Jared Goff to just fall off a cliff when he was signed his contract. That didn't happen. Now, Dallas performs best with a balanced game script where Prescott can utilize play action, which isn't a possibility right now due to their porous offensive line. And I think the Detroit Lions showed that during Sunday's beatdown. I mean, they just got after Dak, 24 pressures on the day and a few sacks. The next dud for me right now is Saquon Barkley. Now, I haven't spoken about any of these with Jared, so I don't know if he agrees or disagrees with any of these. But Saquon Barkley right now has been kind of prone to boomer bust performances since entering the league, and his all or nothing tendency to search for big play results in the occasional flop is generally what happens. Now, during an incredibly dull game against Cleveland, where neither offense seemed capable of moving the ball, Philadelphia force-fed Barkley 20 times, but he generated just 54 yards of offense, 47 rushing, 7 receiving, against what is a pretty stout Browns front, nonetheless. Now, this is the second disappointing effort in a row for Saquon, who has hit the skids since a magnificent Week 3 outing against New Orleans. Any takeaway on Saquon? What are you feeling here on Saquon?
Yeah. I don't necessarily feel. Yeah, it certainly was a dud performance this week, and I think it was a bye last week, right? So it was going back to like late September when he had that Tampa Bay game. But still, 10 carries, 84 yards. I'm seeing. I mean, the efficiency was there, 8.4 yards a carry. So he's still averaging over 5 yards a carry. He's got 4 touchdowns. This game was different, I think, but I'm still pretty high on Saquon. I think he does finally have an offense where there are other weapons that can take some pressure off of him. So it's also like with the Giants, there just wasn't anything to take any heat off of him. Everybody can key in on him. So I do think he's going to be fine. But yeah, definitely disappointing performance against Cleveland.
Definitely. My last dud of the week is Brandon Pettigrew. I'm sorry, Brandon Pettigrew.
Oh, stop it.
Brandon Ayuk. You can cue up the Natalie Portman Star Wars meme here in a game when San Francisco scored 36 points and quarterback Brock Purdy threw 3 touchdowns. Ayuk had a good game, right? No, not so much. Ayuk managed to catch just 2 passes on 4 targets for 37 yards total. As if that wasn't frustrating enough, his 5.7 PPR points mark the 5th time in 6 weeks that he has failed to eclipse double digits. All this for a player who held San Francisco's feet to the fire, demanding he be paid as a top 10 wide receiver, and certainly was paid. Now, this is not a good season for Brandon Ayuk. I'd attempt to paint a rosy picture for the rest of the season outlook, but that is a pretty difficult endeavor at this point in the season for his performances. Now, San Francisco has an embarrassment of riches on offense, and things will become even murkier once Christian McCaffrey returns. But the biggest question mark above McCaffrey is, how long is he going to stay? He's definitely battling, a major issue here with both Achilles tendons, having that tendinopathy, which can flare up at any time. And the 49ers also have an emergence of Juwan Jennings and now a resurgence of George Kittle. So they kind of have this 3-headed monster. And in the ground game, it will make it difficult to envision consistent production moving forward for Brandon Ayuk. Any thoughts on Ayuk?
I think he falls into the same camp as others, in which it's going to be pick your poison every week. I think there's going to be hits and misses on the 49ers weapons on a weekly basis. I think if you really want to invest in this 49ers offense, the way to go is with Brock Purdy, where you can get a little bit of all of them. or when you have a clear-cut running back like a McCaffrey last year, or Mason earlier this year, then I think that's the best place to go. Otherwise, you're gonna boom or bust on some of these receivers just about every week.
Seems like a very, very fair point there. And now for the studs. Now, I promise you this is not bias by any means. I mean, it could be, but it's not. My first stud of the week is Jared Goff. Now, Jared is leading the Lions team to what could be its best offensive performance in the history of the franchise. A quarterback that has been called a systems guy, a game manager, and overpaid. Nonetheless, he just scorched the earth that Jerry Jones walks on, putting up 47 points in week 6 and a combined 89 points in back-to-back weeks combined, scoring points on every single drive in Sunday's game. Not one single punt from the Lions all day. Now, Hendon Hooker, when he came in, obviously the Lions did not score on that drive, but that Jared wasn't in. No 3-and-outs unless you count a 3-play scoring drive with a 52-yard bomb in stride to Sam Laporta, which would have been the only 3-and-out of the day. Now, Jared was 18 of 25 for 315 yards, boasted a 72% completion percentage, no interceptions or turnovers whatsoever for the Lions on Sunday. Jared has averaged just 2.67 seconds of time to throw in this game, which didn't make sense to me. When you watch the game, it looks like he had all day. Next Gen is telling us a different story here. He only took 2 sacks in the game, putting up 153.8 quarterback rating for the second time this season, and a QBR of 71.5, coming off of a week 5 league-leading QBR of 93.6. Now get this, 14 explosive plays in week 6, 14 on 18 completions for Jared Goff. Now, Jared got off to a slow start, fantasy points wise, but the last 2 weeks should be more of what to expect. However, I have Jared as a QB2 option, tier 2 option right now with an expected average of about 18 points per week the rest of the season. The run game is just too good for the Detroit Lions to ignore. And with a heavily balanced offense, Jared just won't have or get as many opportunities to score points as a pass-heavy team would, or a quarterback that likes to run and score with his legs, which simply is not Jared Goff. Any thoughts on Jared Goff here?
Yeah, I think let's look at Sunday first. Impressive under pressure, 6 for 7, 178 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is by far his best performance under pressure. Historically, Jared Goff is not good when he does not have a clean pocket. You go back to 2023, he had the biggest variance between a clean pocket and pressure pocket. His rating went from 115.8 all the way down to 64.3. So I think Jared Goff, when he has time, and our offensive line often gives him time in a clean pocket, particularly against a team like Dallas, you can expect a clean pocket for most of the time. I'm a little worried about him this week with the blitzing schemes that the Vikings have. Brian Flores, leading candidate for coordinator of the year. So by and large, I thought Jared Goff played exceptional. And I think the 6 of 7 for 178 and 2 touchdowns under pressure on Sunday is the best he's had under pressure. So can he keep that up? He hasn't shown historically that he can, but if you get a team like Dallas who's beat up and you expect to have a clean pocket, then he is the highest rated passer with a clean pocket. So,
I love it. So
it's hard to say.
I had him as a tier 2. I mean, would you agree, moving forward? I mean, I understand that, Jared has an explosive offense, but he's just not one to score a bunch of fantasy points. He can put up a bunch of yards. He can put up a couple of touchdowns, but unless he's scoring with his feet or throwing 3 or more touchdowns in a game, it just seems like our heavy run scheme kind of drowns out his ability.
And he's not
points.
scoring with his feet. So,
no.
So he has to have a 3-touchdown game, 300-yard game. Right. A lot of times with bonuses, if you get to 300 yards, which could give you that extra 5 points, like it would be with a rushing touchdown as an example. But by and large, you're going to get a lot of the games like the Arizona game, 18 for 23, 199 yards. 2 touchdowns and a pick. Like, you're going to get a lot of those. So, I wouldn't put him quite into Q or into tier 2. I think he's more in the tier 3 range when you're looking at who are those bona fide tier 1s, and it's your Josh Allens and it's your Jaden Daniels and your Lamar Jackson, right? Tier 2, you might put Mahomes in tier 2, but then you're looking at your Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray's, Jordan Love's, and I think Goff's probably a tier below that, just because his ceiling isn't as high as a lot of these guys are.
Yeah,
a great game from Jared Goff is going to be what you got on Sunday, and you're going to get 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's all you can ask for, but that's also his ceiling. Where there's other quarterbacks like a Jaden or Lamar Jackson whose ceiling is so much higher because they can do that plus a run for 100 yards and a touchdown. So I would probably put him in the tier 3 category on fantasy the rest of the way.
Makes sense now that you explained it that way. Jamie Hami, I agree. And she says, I've noticed that not many people are complaining about Goff anymore. Most quarterbacks don't do as well under pressure. The results are what counts. I wouldn't trade Goff for anyone. Neither would I. Stud wide receiver for the week for me, well, it was none other than Chris Godwin. You want to win a bar bet with a friend, ask them who the overall wide receiver 1 is through the first 6 weeks of the fantasy season. That's right. It's Chris Godwin. The past weekend, Godwin caught a season-high 11 receptions on 13 targets, finishing with 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. With New Orleans emphasizing shutting down Mike Evans, Baker Mayfield peppered Godwin up and down the field, and the Saints failed to make any adjustments or changes in strategy. Sunday's outburst was notable, but it has been Godwin's high floor that has me most excited for his 2024 finish. He has caught at least 5 receptions and surpassed 53 yards in every game, and has averaged an astounding 21 PPR points per week. Any thoughts on Godwin?
No, they got a lot of weapons there, and when you look at the route percentages total for week 6, really any week, Godwin is like touching the far end of the chart, close to 100% in terms of a route run percentage when he's on the field. The Baker Mayfield, very underrated quarterback. You hate to say it, but from a fantasy perspective, he's probably even somebody that I would want more than Goff, just because of the points he gets with his legs and the weapons that he has. The stats in the end are what matters in fantasy, not what you see on the field, not what the team does. What are those stats, right? Would I want Baker Mayfield being the quarterback of the Lions over Jared Goff? No. But when you're looking at just pure stats, like, he's got somebody that can get him the ball, and Godwin has been by and large the highest targeted and running the most routes for an offense that's been throwing the ball quite a bit.
Love it. Now, my last stud is none other than David Montgomery. Now, this one is a bit of a double-edged sword for me, because Demo is a power runner, and he has the ability to make big plays. Heading into week 6, he was rewarded with a 2-year extension that came right at the right time. He also broke Walter Payton's record of the most games in a row with a touchdown, now at 8 games in a row. Given the Lions run a very balanced offense, and even in the backfield, where the splits between him and Jahmyr Gibbs are almost equal. I mean, right down the middle. And that's that double-edged sword that I speak to. He may not be leading the league in yards or anything, but he is an absolute dog on the field, and when you need a touchdown, you're going to get it. Why Montgomery is a fantasy stud for me? Well, one, it's consistent production. Over the last 8 games, Montgomery has scored a rushing touchdown in every game. This type of production is invaluable in a fantasy football world, especially as managers look to fill their rosters with reliable players. 2, he's got dual threat capability. Montgomery is not just a one-dimensional back. He can also catch passes out of the backfield, often not utilized or underutilized in this scheme, but adding an extra layer of versatility to his game. This dual threat ability makes him even more appealing in PPR leagues. Number 3, offensive system. The Lions' offensive scheme perfectly complements Montgomery's strengths, with a strong offensive line, creating running lanes, and a balanced attack that keeps defenses guessing. Number 4, volume and trust. The coaching staff trusts Montgomery as their lead back and a goal line back, which translates to a high volume of carries in and around the red zone. This level of trust is crucial for fantasy success, as it ensures that he will consistently see the ball in those critical situations. Matchup potential. With the Lions looking to build momentum, upcoming matchups present favorable opportunities for Montgomery throughout the rest of the season to continue his dominance as defenses focus on the passing game. He will likely find room to operate and exploit some weaknesses. I just put down his stats for the season for some reason. Do you happen to have Montgomery's weekly stats?
Yeah, pull those up.
I want to say he wasn't doing terrible. What was he averaging, pretty much every week?
So rushing yards, 91, 35, 105, 40, and then 80 against Dallas.
I'm sorry, fantasy. He was like, here we go.
Sorry.
16.3 in week 1, 17 in week 2, 21.2 in week 3, 15 in week 4, bye week, and then 21 versus Dallas. So he's definitely scoring a lot of points. Would you have him as a tier 1 running back in this type of? I mean, the points would say yes, but
not enough receiving volume for tier 1. So the tier 1s are really going to be your true dual threats. You made a good point though. Like he caught 50 balls in Chicago maybe his second year in the league. Maybe it was his third year. He caught like 55 passes. I think between 2 years he caught 100 passes. Which that's a lot, that's a lot. He's not going to see that, nearly as much in Detroit. I think last year he caught 16 all year.
They ran
but he's already got 10 this year. So but he's also caught every target that he's had. He's 10 for 10.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the Lions is that Montgomery's on the field about 35% of the snaps. Mm-hmm. Jahmyr Gibbs on the field for about 55% of the snaps. So when Montgomery's on the field, he's likely getting used. And when you get down to the goal line, when you get a touchdown in fantasy, like that makes up for any sort of poor yardage showings. And then when you get both, then you're in good shape. But I would probably put Montgomery still in that, tier 2, tier 3, but he has a very high floor. And what we mean by that is his worst game is still going to be better than most players' worst game.
Absolutely.
He's still going to be solid. He's not one you even think about putting on the bench. He's a lock and load every week, and that's really what matters. You don't have to think about, man, should I play him? Should I not? He's not your Javonte Williams in Denver where you're just like, God, should I play him or should I flex in somebody else? Like if you have Montgomery, you're playing him every week with confidence.
I would think that it would be a very difficult situation if you had both Gibbs and Montgomery somehow on your roster, but the thing that I love about Montgomery, I mean, he's right now he's averaging about 18 points a week. Yep. And that's really solid for what you're getting out of a guy that is splitting carries, number one, and also in a very split offense. I mean, it is right down the middle, 50-50 between passes and rush attempts per game with this Lions offense. And to go off of your Chicago statement there, they ran a lot of screens. The Lions are not running hardly any screens. I don't see enough. And maybe that's a part of the game that they just haven't opened up yet and they're saving it, but we'll see. Maybe they'll use it against Minnesota this week. All right.
They might have to because they're going to have to get the ball out quick against Minnesota.
Yeah, absolutely. So next up, let's get to some of the hits and misses from last week's show, week 6 recap. Take it away, Jared, on what's up for us here.
Yeah, so a couple of nice hits on the core running backs for the week. They all stepped up to the plate. Bijan Robinson, Bucky Irving, Tony Pollard. We were also wise in who we were trying to avoid last week in a couple spots. Rico Dowdle, nothing. Trey Tucker, literally nothing. And Dallas Goedert. Now, Dallas Goedert did get hurt, and that obviously took him out of the game. And so some of that, goose egg that he put up was due to that. But we, nonetheless, had advised people to stay away. We talked about Chase Brown last week. Once again, he led the backfield by a wide margin over Zach Moss. Zach Moss also seems to have developed a fumbling problem that is going to be advantageous for Chase Brown, like we've been talking about the last few weeks. In fairness, Chase Brown also fumbled, but he fumbled it out of bounds, and nobody recovered it. So he's sort of off the hook. Zach Moss definitely is he's trending down. If we want to, when we get to that section, we'll talk about that. So core running backs, very good week. We advised to stay away from some players who really did put up some duds, and then hopefully you're still on Chase Brown. I think the big misses. I thought Dallas was going to be much more effective in the passing game against the Lions. I really didn't think there'd be anything going on with the run game. I thought they were going to put CeeDee Lamb and pick on Terrion Arnold quite a bit. He's, if he's not, Terrion Arnold is doing okay. Like, he's a rookie in his first quarter of a season. He's highly penalized, and I thought that Dallas was going to try to take advantage of that.
He had a great game. He had a phenomenal game.
He did well. He did really well in that game. Yeah. And I think a lot of that had to do with some of the pressure that Prescott was under. But I had heavy ownership in Prescott. I had heavy ownership in Tolbert, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson. I really thought that this was going to be more of a shootout and we would get more from Dak Prescott. So as you can probably imagine, any lineups I had with that
rough week
quad of players was rough. The other one that really surprised me that I missed on that we talked about last week was Calvin Ridley. And I know there was 2 weeks ago, he was a bit of a squeaky wheel. He wanted the ball more. He didn't get the ball. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let me start with this. Gus Bradley, the Indianapolis defensive coordinator, runs a very predictable 4-3 defense. Doesn't do much in the scheme. It's generally very bland. And slot wide receivers have traditionally had a lot of success. I expected Tennessee to leverage Ridley in the slot, where he plays, I think, 28 to 35% of the time. And Ridley, coming off a week where he was a little bit, squeaky wheel about not getting the ball, I thought this was a perfect spot for him. I just failed to account for how bad Will Levis is. He got 8 targets, so the read was right. They were trying to get the ball to Calvin Ridley. None of these 8 passes were completed, though. He was 0 for 8. So finally they got desperate and they handed the ball off to him and he got 9 yards. So when I look at it, it was the right read because they were peppering him with targets. Will Levis just couldn't get him the ball. And so that was another big miss that we had from last week. But overall, we look at the quarterbacks outside of Dak Prescott. We did pretty well on our core plays, Lamar Jackson, and I had Spencer Rattler. We talked about Spencer Rattler last week. I wasn't looking for a blow up game from Spencer Rattler. We got 16 points, I think it was, from Spencer. That's all we needed. He cost $4,000, right? It allows us to pay up in other places. So Spencer Rattler did exactly what I had envisioned him to do. He played adequate. Big misses on Will Levis, like we talked about, is also Kyler Murray. I also had advised avoiding CJ Stroud last week. Now, he only had 192 yards passing, but he did score 3 touchdowns. So he was very efficient with those 192.
It was such a lopsided game for him. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's usually you don't score 3 tutties on under 200 yards, but
yeah. So again, I feel like it was the right read. Things just didn't fall, and that often happens in this fickle hobby.
Yeah.
Running backs were pretty money, like we said. I talked about that in the open. Bucky Irving, Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard all played really well. I would put Josh Jacobs in a neutral game. He did okay, not as much as you want him to score. We did miss on our GPP suggestion of Antonio Gibson. Didn't come through, even without Ramondre Stevenson. It turns out Drake May's not bad. And so Antonio Gibson didn't get a lot of run. I was avoiding Joe Mixon as well. So we advised avoiding Rico Dowdle. I also advised avoiding Joe Mixon. I didn't think that with the others playing okay in his absence, they weren't going to rush him back in. I thought his volume would be low. That was wrong. He played and he played well. And so that was a miss on our side on the running backs.
I don't know if you could take a Dallas Cowboy running back the rest of the season. I mean, I think that I would just take him right off your board. I don't know who they're going to go up against this year that's going to give them any sort of an opportunity. They just have not looked good all year running the ball. I mean, all 6 weeks they've looked terrible.
Yep. The line isn't what it used to be in Dallas.
No.
I think also the problem that you have when you get quarterbacks and defensive players and wide receivers that command top of the market money is, your depth takes a hit. You can't invest other places of your team. And I think Dallas is not run by a general manager. It's run by an owner. And I think there's a lot of things, like very good businessman, but he just doesn't know how to assemble a team. With the resources that they have, there's absolutely zero excuse for not even being in an NFC championship game in, what is it now, close to 30 years, 32 years, something like that.
Wow. Well, he's, Jerry's 82 years old. I mean, you would think that at some point he's just going to say, look, I'm past my prime with all this. I need someone to do the work for me. And no, he's still in front of the camera.
Ego.
Yeah.
Can't let it go.
Dude, you just let it go, man. Like, you've got to let somebody help you win. I mean, look, he's had a tremendous ownership of the Cowboys, and it's been,
business wise, yes, he's grown the brand.
Yeah. And then they had their years.
Mm-hmm.
They had their years. They had some exciting players, but yeah, from the other side of the business, they're not winning games. They're not winning the right games.
He won the Super Bowls the first couple years as ownership, and that was probably the worst thing that could happen because he thought he was capable of doing it again, and he's never been able to. This is arguably the worst stretch of history in the Dallas Cowboys, right? They haven't done anything. They're getting blown out at home. It's not a good situation.
Yeah, I would agree. Did we already talk about wide receivers?
Wide receivers, fairly good on the core plays. Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed had 6 catches, which was helpful for PPR and a touchdown. CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra both had average games, maybe a call above average, 13 to 16 points. Nothing crazy, but nothing that hurts you either. I was on Ladd McConkey and Jalen Tolbert from a GPP perspective. Both ended up with 4 for 43. That's not going to get you there. Calvin Ridley, the read was right. Like we said, he had 8 targets, but no catches. And then Michael Wilson did get a touchdown, but ultimately not a lot of yards, 2 catches, 21 yards in that score. We were smart to avoid Trey Tucker like we advised. And then Cortland Sutton, he was 4 for 53, but he did get a late touchdown. So he actually ended up being okay in terms of fantasy wise. And then lastly, tight ends, the big miss here was Jake Ferguson. And we also were on Sam Laporta just because we expected low ownership. Now listen, Sam Laporta, 11 points ish in fantasy. He had a nice touchdown, but that's it. 1 target, 1 catch. He made it count, but I have a hard time counting that a win, just with 11 points. It's the same as, having 5 for 60. I wouldn't have called that a win. So Sam Laporta was a bit on the neutral side. GPP, some of the cheaper plays, Zach Ertz, Mark Andrews, those were nice hits. And like we talked about, avoiding Dallas Goedert turned out to be a good one as well.
Nice work, man. I mean, look, you had a down week in some respects, according maybe to what your belief is. I mean, you always do such a great job, but you're more than 50% correct in all this. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty hard to do.
I generally will look at, I kind of put everything into, yes, that was the right read. So I kind of put that into the win column, the green column, if you will. And then I look at now I was completely wrong on that. That goes in the red. And then if it's kind of neutral, it's like, yeah, it wasn't great, it wasn't bad. And then I put it into kind of just a black column. And so like last week we were like 24, 8 and 3, 12, 11 and 7 this week. So I would say still over 500, but not what I'd like to be in terms of, I'd still like to be up more in that 75% range.
Yeah, I was up there, man. I was jamming 80%, and I think I'm all the way down in the low 50s now on my pick'ems. Like the last couple weeks they have hurt me big time. I mean, losing games in the last 3 minutes has been the key to this season, and so many tight games, decided by a touchdown or less. It's kind of been the key to losing. Now, if I was picking against the spread, now that would be a different story. I'd be up there. So this is kind of last week's filler question of the day or statement. The sample size keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, now we're kind of into the meat of the schedule, the meat of the season.
This is it.
You're a third of the way in. There is no going back. The waiver wires are slim. You're going to have some weekly change ups. You might have some people that drop off a guy here or there for whatever reason. But, for most of, the fantasy football owners that know what they're doing, they're going to hold tight to what they have, knowing what's coming down the pike here. A lot of injuries, a lot of injuries this season, really changing the scope for a lot of teams. I've pretty much been out since week 1 in my little fun league, which is okay. I don't need to win. It's more for everybody else to have fun, right? That's the excuse we'll have. What are you seeing here? Like, what do we really need to start focusing on now that we're headed into week 7? What is your major tip of the week?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in it, first off, one thing, if you're not in it, like if you're 0-6 at this point, it's easy just to kind of cash it in. For the integrity of your leagues, if you're 0-6, 1-5, you don't have a shot to climb out. Of course, I would disagree because it's never over till it's over. But 2, do the respect of your league mates, do the respect of your commissioner, continue to play, right? Because you deciding not to set a lineup could impact a game that does matter or a scoring system that does matter and gives them essentially a free win, right? So just make sure for the integrity of the leagues, let's continue to play this thing out. Make sure, I'm not saying you need to be out scouring the waiver wire. Make sure you're setting an active lineup. That's really the minimum that everybody needs to be able to commit to when they play fantasy football.
That is such a great point. So let me ask you this, and because I've never played in a high stakes league like you do, what happens? I mean, I would expect that those guys are doing the right thing because they understand the integrity of the game. But how do you manage that? I mean, what if someone's just not setting lineups and they just kind of, I put $1,000 in, I don't care, I'm going to lose, I'm done, I'm out, and they walk away?
Yeah, I haven't really had it happen in some of the higher. I've had it happen in some home leagues where, people aren't setting their lineup. It's frustrating, but the high stakes leagues, I haven't seen a lot of it. The way I typically handle if I'm a commissioner is if somebody doesn't set their lineup and they're mathematically eliminated, I'll go in as a commissioner and just set what would be their highest projected lineup for them, right? And
okay.
I would also not invite them back the following year.
Right.
So you're out, like, just go, but for the sake of the integrity of the league, if that person is playing somebody who needs a win to get into the playoffs or knock somebody else out of the playoffs and they're not setting a lineup and that team gets a free win and somebody else gets knocked out, it's just not fair. So so for the integrity of it, you want to set the optimum lineup. I think if something did happen in a high stakes league, I think we'd have a lot of noisy other participants that would make sure that got escalated to the governing body of the FFPC and it would get handled. But I haven't seen that, luckily, in some of the high stakes stuff that I do.
That brings me to maybe an idea. I don't know if this exists, but why couldn't you have an automatic setting that no matter what, your team is scheduled to have the highest, or what you just said, it's going to be set to the best lineup possible based on the algorithm, and that AI just does it for you every week. It's set to automatic. It's going to set it to the highest, percentage of probability for wins possible. That way if you're hands off and you walk away, it's still doing that and it's keeping everybody above board. You would think that if there's a setting that you could just turn on to make sure that no matter what, everybody's roster is set. And if you're active, you can go in and uncheck it and say, nope, I don't want that. I want this,
Yeah, I guess my immediate response to that is, why play?
Well, yeah.
Why play if you're going to do that, right?
But it happens.
This is the fun of it. Yeah, I think, and there are sites out there that I've used where you can go in and click a button, at the top where you set your lineup. Just say, set optimal lineup. You click the button and it sets your optimal lineup, but not an automatic setting that goes week over week. You still have to go in there and click set optimal lineup. But it's a fair question. I think we have to make sure that the integrity of some of these leagues are staying intact, and because nobody wants a free win, really.
Right. Well, talking about free wins, man, while we've been on air, I guess one of my videos just went crazy with 13,000 views in the last hour and a half. I don't know what's going on here. It's all about the Lions' recent signing, the Lions edge rusher that they just picked up. So
Isaiah Thomas?
Huh?
Isaiah Thomas?
Yeah. The point guard for the Pistons. That's right. Wasn't there an Isaiah Thomas that played for the Tigers too? I think there was, or something.
Could be.
I don't remember. All right, so buy low, sell high. What's up this week on the?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that you want to look at is if you're still in your league, and again, if you're not 0-5, 0-6, 1-5, and you are in the thick of things, think about ways and people that you can be selling right now, because maybe you're not bought into them full time down the road, but you think they just had a good game and you might be able to get something back from them. Like think of like a Mark Andrews or a Sam Laporta. I'm probably selling Sam Laporta at this point. He had one target. He made it count, but he had one target. And we have a sample size now of 6, and there hasn't been a whole lot from Sam Laporta. He did have that game, so you might be able to get a little bit more value in return for Sam Laporta. Same thing with Mark Andrews. I think we talked about this in the 3rd or 4th week, and people were asking in the chat, like, what should we do about Mark Andrews? Wait for him to have a good game and then flip him out is what I would do. And he just had his big game. I would be flipping him out right now in terms of who I'm selling now. And lastly, sometimes they didn't necessarily have a good game, but you just got to cut your losses. And I would put like Javonte Williams or someone like that in that camp for me right now.
So Sam Laporta right now is on pace for 45 receptions and 676 yards. I had him as
tight end 3.
What's that?
A backup tight end.
Yeah.
He is.
Well, 700 yards receiving it's quite a bit for a tight end, or at least for a rookie. He's not a rookie anymore. I had him as a 50 and 800 this year with 8 TDs. That's right. That's where I thought Sam Laporta could fit in. I didn't think that he was going to eclipse what he did last year. That is extremely difficult. But again, this offense for the Lions is so balanced. Sam Laporta just wasn't targeted a whole lot in the beginning of the season. I think he was still battling some injury, but you're going to start seeing his play pick up. I just don't know if it's going to be to the tune of what you want for a starting tight end when, there might be.
I would be going to a tight end needy team and I would be saying, listen, he just had arguably his best game of the season. He finally got in the end zone. You're going to see a pickup and get them to buy on that. Right. And if it does happen, great. Right. We want that to happen. But ultimately, if it does end up being more of a roller coaster ride with Sam Laporta, you maximize your value and you got out when the value was the highest. That would be my suggestion. Same thing when you're trying to find bargains. Let's look for players who maybe aren't quite getting the stats or the points that you expected them to get, and maybe had a down game, right? And ultimately, you're still going to have to pay a heavy price for people like CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, and even Josh Jacobs, who I have on this list, but probably 10% less this week than maybe what you would have otherwise, right? And you're just looking for those little edges in terms of, can I acquire CeeDee Lamb for just a little bit less now? Because I do feel long-term CeeDee Lamb is going to be fine. I think Mike Evans has a great schedule coming up, great matchups in terms of opposing cornerbacks, going against high-scoring offenses where there's going to be a lot of points. I would be buying in on Mike Evans after a down game. And then Josh Jacobs, the reason here, Jordan Love passes a lot. He throws for a lot of touchdowns. It gets starting to get cold in Green Bay right now. Wind, rain, snow, all that stuff's going to be into play here towards the end of the season. And that's where you really see like a running back like Josh Jacobs be more heavily utilized. And so I can see buying in on Josh Jacobs now. I see him trending up here as we go.
Well, we've got a bit of some breaking news, Jared. Breaking news here. Ali McNeil, according to Adam Schefter at 7:44 p.m., has been ruled out with a pectoral tear. He will now be going under surgery. He'll be gone. I'm just kidding. Ali McNeil is signing a 4-year contract extension with the Detroit Lions.
Good for him. Good for him.
Nice work.
Dude, you had me there. I was like, what is wrong with everybody's pectoral muscles on the Lions defensive line?
Yeah, that was probably not a tasteful joke, but I did ask the same question in the video yesterday because and I'm going to put this on the trainers. This is at least the fourth, if not the fifth pectoral injury that we have seen dating back to, CJ Gardner-Johnson last season. And this is all in the training process, when they're trying to pull these runners down, and the runners are dragging away. It's this motion that your arms are pulling away from you where that pec is getting torn. So it's resistance training. They need more resistance training on the pec muscles. You can't skip chest day. You just can't. You have to work on, and you have to work on the lats and the shoulders and the inner muscles, everything. And look, I don't know, muscles like these guys do, right? But at least I know resistance training is very beneficial for these things. And I'm wondering if it's being missed. So their training staff needs to take a very hard look at what they're having these players do, because they're missing something. They're missing something.
Yeah, I given my current shape, I probably can't weigh in on this topic.
I'm in the same boat, buddy. I'm in the same boat. So
yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's so hard to say. It's hard to say.
So I just seen this in the chat. People think that we have other moves coming. I will. Let me throw some water on your flames right now. I apologize. This is not a panic signing, but it's a panic signing at the same time. So the Lions are looking at this like, okay, we know that we want to get Aleem McNeil done. And that was probably going to happen in the offseason, but now we've got this major injury to Hutch. We need McNeil next year. We cannot take a chance of McNeil walking in free agency and getting a bigger bag. So they got the deal done. They're securing their interior defensive line right now for the foreseeable future, because that's all they have without Aiden Hutchinson. They're probably going to draft a defensive end in the first round next year, and Brad Holmes is probably going to move up as far as he can in the draft to make that happen. That is my number one call of this season right now for next year, is we are going to end up with a first round or a second round defensive end, and Brad is going to move up, move around, do whatever he can to make it happen. This doesn't mean that we have another defensive end on the way. It just means that the Lions are securing a portion of their defense that they can't be without next year and for the balance of this year. So, I mean, obviously Aleem wasn't going anywhere this year, but I think that this move is more in line with them trying to figure out what their finances are going to be and what they're going to be for the foreseeable and how they can fit in, some other opportunities.
No, but it could be like, I agree with you. I don't think we're making a big splashy signing, and we can talk more about this tomorrow.
Yeah,
but it could be. But we could be trying to lock things in just to see where we stand,
right?
And then we can figure out, like, what can we afford, right? What can we comfortably afford, knowing what that deal is going to be. Now, the reality is we announced a deal today. There is an almost certainty that this deal was being discussed well before Sunday. They didn't just come to this deal in the last 2 days since Hutch's injury.
Correct.
So this has probably been weeks upon weeks of negotiation already. And so to think that we just decided on Monday morning because Hutch got hurt that we were going to get a deal done with Aleem in 24 hours just isn't reasonable. It's not.
It probably moved the needle a little bit, but yeah, Brad Holmes has told us twice that since May they've had conversations with his agent, but the conversations were kind of, they weren't really moving. If
nothing
anywhere
else, it might have been something where Aleem McNeil said, "Look how fragile this can be."
Yeah, like
he was his leg on the other end of that. Right. He might be more motivated to get this deal done than the Lions.
Could you imagine if we lost them both on the same injury, the same play?
Mm-mm.
I mean, because that was McNeil's leg. They could have shattered his shin. I guess. Hey, one bone was going to give one way or the other. All right, we're going to get off track here. So, what's next here? I lost my sheet.
So we can quickly go through some trending up, trending down, and then let's talk a little bit about implications of the two trades today.
All right, go for it.
Trending down. We'll get into more of this in a second. Alan Lazard, Mike Williams, you could put in there as well. Travis Etienne, he's hurt on the shelf. I think he's also on the trade block. Dak Prescott, there's no line, there's no running game. Keon Coleman, also with the Amari Cooper trade today, I think is wasn't really taking off yet anyway, but I think he's definitely going to be more on the back burner for now. On the same note, trending up, Amari Cooper. When you look at number ones in the Buffalo Bills offense with Josh Allen at quarterback, Stephon Diggs was on pace for 111 catches, 1,343 yards, and just over 9 touchdowns last year. So if you want to put Amari Cooper skill-wise in the same bucket as Stephon Diggs, they're roughly the same age. I wouldn't say one is vastly better than the other. I think Amari Cooper's really been struggling in Cleveland, and anybody would. So I think you're looking at a 110 catch, 1,300 yard, 9 touchdown type receiver from Amari Cooper. And that's a hell of a lot more than he was going to get in Cleveland. So I think he's definitely trending up. We talked about Chase Brown. Now, listen, I might be in the minority in this, but I think there's going to be positive things happening for George Pickens and Najee Harris in Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson starting. The big reason for that is Justin Fields was taking some of the was taking some of the rushing yards for himself, right? And he's gifted, he can. But I think what you're not going to find Russell Wilson running it 7-8 times a game like Justin Fields was. He's going to look down the field, right? And he is an accurate passer. He's an accurate deep ball passer. So I do think there's a step up in the passing game from George Pickens. And because he's not running as much, the volume is also going to be a little bit higher. I don't necessarily like George Pickens this week against Sauce Gardner, but overall, I think if Russell Wilson maintains the starting job, I think Pickens is going to tick up. And the same can be said for Najee Harris. When you get down to the goal line, you get down to the 1 yard line. Right now, a lot of times Fields is taking it in himself. That's not going to happen with Russell Wilson. That's going to be Najee Harris's volume. And he had probably one of the best games he's had in a long time on Sunday. And so I think they're going to use Najee Harris to maybe roll Russell Wilson out a little bit, let him use his mobility, but not necessarily be a running quarterback. And I think that's going to be good for both Pickens and Najee Harris. And then lastly, trending up, we got some big names coming off IR. You got Cooper Kupp, you got TJ Hawkinson, and you got Nick Chubb. So all are scheduled to come off the IR as early as this week. I haven't heard on Hawkinson, but I know Cooper Kupp's expected to play, and Nick Chubb came out and said he was playing. Those are like tier 1 players from a year ago that haven't seen the field much, if not all, this year. And so think about those. I doubt they're on your waiver wire, but it might be time to maybe take a speculate. If you're sitting at 2-4, 3-5, or you're sitting at 2-4, 3-3, and you want to get back in the game, take a shot on one of these guys, right? Right, and this might be the cheapest you get them again. So think about some of those big names coming off the waiver wire.
Love it.
Coming off of IR.
Yeah, I love it. I don't know so much about the Russell Wilson thing. I kind of think that... Not a popular opinion. I get it. No, I kind of think that Justin Fields is the better quarterback play right now. But, we're going to see quickly.
Justin Fields... Yeah, just to your point. Sorry to interrupt you. But Justin Fields he should stay as the quarterback of the Steelers. You're 4-2. You're playing well, right? So, like as a Steeler fan, I would want to see Fields in there. But Russell Wilson's going to get his chance. And because of the style of offense that they're going to have to play with Russell Wilson, it's going to open up more things for the other players. That's all I'm saying. If I'm the Steelers, I don't think Russell Wilson's a better quarterback for the Steelers right now, though.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Justin Fields, never have been. I mean, I think that there is some some pitfalls with a dual threat quarterback. It does limit, what the rest of the team can do. It does make your team, quite honestly, I think it removes some of the dimensions of a team when you have a dual threat. I don't think it adds more all the time. I think it removes some of the dimensions of the team because guys aren't getting utilized. And when you have a guy that just wants to tuck it and run, I think it limits the effectiveness of some of the weapons that you brought in. And, I guess
And that's the point why I think Pickens and Najee Harris can stand to be better with Russell Wilson. I don't think you should go out and get Russell Wilson, but those guys are probably going to see a bit more volume.
Yeah. What do we have left here to cover? So we had week 7 targets. Did you do winners and losers yet of today's trade? No, we haven't.
I don't think we have, but I think the obvious ones: Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman. I think those are going to be guys that are going to take a pretty big step back right now. I mean, Garrett Wilson's still going to have some volume, but not to the amount of targets leading the league in targets as he had before. It doesn't really matter on the Raiders. Devontae wasn't playing anyway. I think the big winners here are Devontae and Amari Cooper. They both end up in substantially better spots. I think Josh Allen is a big winner here. And I think Rodgers is fairly neutral. But certainly somewhat better. He's not a lot of people owned Aaron Rodgers or starting him. I think Dalton Kincaid is going to benefit. There's going to be a lot more eyes on Amari Cooper. It's going to free up Dalton Kincaid, who's been a little bit slow moving this year. I don't think Jerry Jeudy is necessarily going to get a big bump with Amari leaving. So he's now going to see he's going to see the top corner now as well. So I would be looking more at Elijah Moore as somebody who might be able to step in and be a contributor for your teams. I think that we're really unknown on where Mike Williams gets traded. I think they put him on the trade block today. And then what I was talking about with Jerry Jeudy and Khalil Shakir, I don't think they're actually going to be downgrades, but we just got to wait and see.
Yeah, the whole Amari Cooper thing to me, it just makes me wonder what else they want to move off of right now. That one,
they should move off their quarterback is what they should do.
I didn't hear anything, about that team really being in the market to move off of Amari. Maybe I missed it. But yeah, he wanted out. Yeah, he wanted out. Interesting to me. All right, what's left to close out the show today?
Waiver targets. Jameis Winston. We talked about it last week. Once he gets the job, he's going to throw it down the field. He's going to score some points. I think running back, very rich on the waiver wire. Sean Tucker, Jalen Wright, Kendre Miller, Tyler Goodson, Amari Demercado had 53% snap share, led RB efficiency, and had 7 targets for the Cardinals. Isaac Guerendo. We talked about Isaac Guerendo way early on.
Yeah.
We said, look out for this guy. He's essentially the number 2. Jordan Mason goes down. Isaac Guerendo gets his chance, right? And he played pretty well. Granted, one of it was a big long run that he had where he arguably went down before the goal line, but certainly somebody worth stashing, especially if you have Jordan Mason or C-Mac. Clyde Edwards-Helaire came off of they activated his window to return. Kareem Hunt seems to have a firm hold of the job. If you want a speculative ad on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, go for it. Wide receivers, Elijah Moore. I think Judy and Njoku are already running 75% route share. So Moore is the one that stands to gain the most from Amari Cooper's absence. Take a look at Demario Douglas, and I'll throw in Troy Franklin for the Broncos as well. Bo Nix and Troy Franklin had a connection in college at Oregon. They seem to be potentially growing something here in Denver as well. So keep an eye on Troy Franklin, and then round it out with the tight ends, Juwan Johnson and Eric All, who had more red zone targets and more routes overall than Mike Gesicki. So if you need some tight end help, that's where I would look.
Yeah, my tight ends have been terrible this season. I haven't been able to win with anybody. All right,
I do want to close on this, though. The Rocked On Fantasy League, again, we started 0-2. We've climbed back to 3-3. We are currently the 3 seed in the playoffs. We had several key performances last week. I'll pull them up real quick. It was from Jordan Love, Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, Terry McLaurin, J-Mo, our kicker again coming through with 12 points.
Who was our kicker this week?
Defense. Younghoe Koo.
Yeah, Koo. Yeah, I love him.
Him in there. And this was all despite we were the second highest scoring team in the league. This is despite having Calvin Ridley, who got us 0.9 points, and DJ Moore, who got us 6. Everybody else stepped up in a big way, all double-digit scorers outside of that. We also had Gabe Davis on our bench, Christian Watson on our bench, Chase Brown on our bench. Algier had 20 points on our bench. So we, by far and away, had the most bench points and second most starter points, even despite those two poor performances.
I love it. Do you want to roll through your DFS, your week 7 lineup real quick, and then you guys can also catch this on Jared's Twitter at JaredE22 on Twitter or X, whatever you want to refer to it as. He will update all of this stuff for you guys throughout the week.
Yeah.
But you do have I love this. I love this lineup.
It's hard to do it on Tuesday, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so many things you just don't know about. But for my cash lineup right now, I've entered in and I've submitted an entry in the head-to-heads and the double-ups for Jaden Daniels, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kyron Williams, Jordan Addison, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, David Njoku, Trey Tucker, and the Giants defense. So all of that is under salary cap. GPP, again, we need to zig when other people zag. I'm going Andy Dalton. I'm keeping Jahmyr Gibbs in here just because I think the need for quick passes is going to be there, and I think Jahmyr Gibbs could have a 6 to 8 reception game. Austin Eckler, this game can go one of two ways. He could get some receptions, or this game could get out of hand and he can get a lot of carries against Carolina. No one's going to be playing Calvin Ridley again this week. No one is. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to go back to Calvin Ridley. He is a squeaky wheel again. I think they're going to go one of these games he's going to blow up. And if I'm the only guy on him, I'll be the only guy on him. But I'm going back to Calvin Ridley. I'm keeping Jordan Addison in there. I'm going to hope for a nice bomb and a big game from Xavier Worthy. I think people will be off Dalton Kincaid at 5,000 this week as well with the Amari Cooper news. I think it's going to help Dalton Kincaid. So I'm going back to Dalton Kincaid, double him up with George Kittle, build a little stack for that Kansas City-San Francisco game. Should be a great game, by the way. And then I'll take the surest shot, if there is one on defense, and take the Buffalo Bills. Probably going to avoid Jerry Jeudy this week. And I'm probably going to avoid Jameson Williams this week. Jameson Williams typically is more on the deep shots. And I don't know if Goff is going to have the time to sit back there and take those deep shots. I could be wrong. We could get him on a reverse or something like that. But Ben Johnson could come up with something. But I'm probably going to be a little lighter on Jameson Williams this week.
All right. So in place of JMO, who are you using?
No, this is for DFS. So
right. That's what I'm saying. So who would you put in?
I've got Xavier Worthy, same kind of player, more likely, I think, to have the long touchdown reception that you can count on. The same kind of player, and then Jordan Addison is another one.
Okay,
Jordan
and
Addison
they're about the same. They're about the same. Well, money wise, I would say that isn't JMO closer to.
Yeah, they're about the same salary. Both would fit under the salary cap.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, cool, man. I'm gonna bust up a live show here about Lee McNeil right after the Fantasy Football Tonight show ends.
Right.
So I'll be getting on here in just a few moments. Another good show, man. You always bring the energy. You always bring really good information. If people just pay attention a little bit and take some of this information and use it, you're going to be better off, because I'll tell you right now, I'm not even taking enough of the information, and he's winning and I'm not. So
the best thing to do is, like, no one has all the answers. No one does. So I usually develop my opinions, both partly with my opinion, and then I also look at respected people and I take little nuggets from every single one of them, and I kind of form what ends up being the strategy for that week. So if nothing else, just, pick a nugget or two out, use it. And, but don't ignore your gut either. It's important, especially if you watch a lot of football. Don't ignore your gut.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate everybody for joining us tonight. And please do us a favor, like the stream on your way out, share it with a friend, especially you know who they are. I mean, the people that love to bet on football or just play casually, just love, playing fantasy football. Maybe they're new. Maybe they're a seasoned veteran. We welcome everybody in to watch the show and be part of it and learn. I'm learning a lot from Jared. And Jared, I appreciate all of your time. We'll see you back here at 9 a.m. Jared's going to have a full breakdown for us on some trade targets to help replace, which you'll never be able to replace Aiden Hutchinson, but to help replace some of his production. And we'll have a good conversation tomorrow morning on the Rise and Grind Morning Show, which will start at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. And Jared, we'll see you back here again on Tuesday night next week. Everybody have a good night. Take care. And
have a good night.
We'll see you here in just a few more moments. All right. Bye-bye.